Totally Football Show. Today, in our first show of a brand new year, we bring you Premier League. After Arsenal's win at the G-Tech, we talk the Gunners' challenge and the aerial threat of Merino, who should be a good jumper, given he's Merino. Plus, there's hot transfer news, a preview of the weekend's games. It's the first of the season's repeat rounds. So what happened last time? And what does a trip to Anfield mean for your dark and shameful Man United relegation battle fantasy? All that, plus prodigal Sunderland in the Championship, and much more in this Totally Football Show. Thursday, January the 2nd, at you listener. Thank you for being with us. Happy 2025. Charlie Oakesha's with us. Hey, Charlie.
Hey, how you doing?
Just ahead of a big trip to Australia for you.
Yes.
When are you heading off?
A week yesterday.
Ooh.
Yeah.
I like it. Jay Harris, welcome back, Jay.
Thank you very much.
Much travelled in recent days.
Feels like it, yeah.
Yeah. And also Duncan Alexander.
Hello, James. Happy New Year.
Thank you so much. Oh, Jay, it was a particularly big New Year's Day in the Harris household.
It certainly was, yeah. My mum's been awarded an MBE for her services to education. Thank you.
That's fantastic.
Very cool, yeah.
What did she do?
So she was a
Did
head...
she pay off the Tory party?
She was a head teacher for nearly 2 decades.
Oh, wow.
And now she's the CEO of an academy, so she looks after multiple schools. So obviously I'm super proud because for teachers to get the recognition is super important. And I've also obviously witnessed and seen some of the things that she's had to deal with over the last 20, 25, 30 years. So hats off to her. I'm super happy.
All right. Congratulations to Mrs. Harris. Mrs. Harris, yeah?
Yeah, Zoe
Miss
Harris, yeah.
She brought up a fine boy in you as well, Jay.
Thank you.
All right. Duncan, have you got hot works in the pipeline vis-a-vis the transfer market at the athletic.com?
Yeah, we're leaning into the transfer window heavily. Don't know if you should lean against the window heavily, but we are. I think it's going to be a very busy, unusually busy window. I think all over the place.
Chris Green, it just so happens, wrote in saying, will this window live up to the billing, or do you think most will take stock until the summer? Everything seems dependent on the FFP merry-go-round. If one club were to scare the horses, who do you reckon it would be?
It's a good question. I think, to answer the first bit, I do think it will be busy. I think increasingly football seasons are sort of split in two. I think clubs, particularly in the EFL, you get players you kind of almost rebuild in January and go again. So, I think obviously there are FFP restrictions, but certain clubs like Manchester City have got a lot of headroom, as it's known in the business. So, I mean,
what can you tell us about City's plans?
Well, I mean, they obviously want to bring in players all over the place. Why wouldn't you when you've been terrible? But I mean, I think sort of midfield and defence and forward is probably But I think midfield and defence is probably what they might look to do. I mean, it could be loans. I mean, it is But we saw Arsenal a few years ago. Arsenal fans disappointed, I guess, for bringing in Trossard and Jorginho at the time. But both have turned out to be reasonably good transfers. So it tends to be a window where you kind of make do and mend a little bit, but a lot of teams need to fix some issues. So I think there will be movement.
Is there 2 questions? One, is there a little scoop that you can throw away? And secondly, if Man City don't do anything particularly over January, would that be a bit of an indication perhaps that they might have an inkling that it's not a good time to be investing.
You're really pushing this.
Well, we'll go with the first one then. Any scoops?
I don't think we've got any definite names so far. I mean, obviously they've been linked with a lot of players. I mean, I guess and this isn't just a City thing, but I think a lot of clubs are monitoring the Dani Olmo situation at Barcelona because they haven't been able to register him. But a bizarre way Spanish football's run where you keep having to register players.
So he was available to play in the first half of the season because somebody else was injured?
Yeah.
Okay, and now that player has come back, that space in the squad's not available.
Yeah, and they've, as always, tried different methods to free up, headroom.
Kneecapping him, or just saying he is injured.
No, he's still injured. Escape to victory. There was a method for getting somebody into the squad that proved very effective.
Yeah, they haven't tried that one yet, but you can't rule it out. He, as it stands, he can't play for Barcelona. So. That might be an option for some teams.
Okay. Duncan's got loads of other scoops, listeners, but they're all embargoed.
Of course. But if you go on to your favourite, theathletic.com, you will find our transfer radar, our transfer deal sheet, and the return of our much-loved Transfer 500 transfer rating. Okay,
I've also seen a few What We're Hearing articles. I like what we're hearing.
Yeah, even a few What We're Seeing as well. So,
is there? Damn.
What we're feeling.
Yeah.
What we're smelling.
That is the next stage, I think. Yeah. Smelling a transfer.
Many thanks to everyone who wrote in. Jaspal, who got in touch over on Hellsite X, said, Jimbo, who would win a totally strongest man amongst the regulars? He's been watching World's Strongest Man, which concluded actually on New Year's Day. Not sure if you caught it, listeners, but if you did, you'll know that it was a particularly vintage edition. And if you didn't, it's available on My5. I would love to see that. A totally strongest man among the regulars. A bit of tire flipping, some yoke, deadlifts, all that stuff. Who do you think? I mean, Jay is obviously young and fit.
Jay looks in good shape.
But I don't go to the gym a lot. I just play football, so I don't really have any like upper body strength.
How's your
like
grip strength? That's key. Also, your endurance. You know, if you're doing the Hercules hold and
Is it fair to say that football writers sort of skew towards kind of thin, spindly, bespectacled men?
I mean,
certainly
today's sample size would certainly suggest
I know for a
that.
fact Tom Williams would think he would win, but
Who?
Tom Williams would.
Do you think he
strut around.
would?
No, I don't think he would win, but he would act like
your
he
VO2 max is notoriously high,
It
which
is
might
actually,
help
yeah.
you.
Yeah.
Oh, I've got a good VO2 max.
All right,
If it's
well, there you
VO2
go.
max
But
you want.
it would be wonderful to see. Let's see if maybe for one of the quiet weeks of the summer we can make this happen. If you're all interested, and film it. Liam can film it for us, and brilliant. Anyway, let's get into the football. Many thanks, Jasper, for allowing me that shameless plug. Second half of the season, which kicks off this weekend. It will be the first of the reverse rounds. It will be mirror fixtures from round 3 back on the 31st of August.
I'm a big fan of this.
What?
It always makes me laugh that in every other country in the world they just properly mirror them.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
your game 1 will be game. But they don't do that here.
Don't do that in the Premier League.
I like the fact they don't.
No, I like it as well. But
It makes it more interesting.
I once spoke to an Italian who was really angry about it. Said, it makes no sense.
It doesn't make any sense, but that's why you like it. Can you remember, though, what happened back on match day 3? Unless you've got the fixtures right there, have you? Shall I shout out the fixtures and see what you can remember?
Yeah.
Okay,
I
so
was in New York for this.
there were a couple of games that really stand out. Maybe I'll focus on those. One is Brighton-Arsenal.
Yes.
Do you remember
Rice
what happened
red
at
card.
Arsenal-Brighton?
Declan Rice.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
First red card.
Delayed the
brilliant.
restart, I believe.
Yeah. Kicked away, or did he, a ball just as it was about to be taken in a free kick type thing. I mean,
A very good pantomime. Veltman did a good sort of,
very good. Okay, 1-1 that finished, and they go again this weekend at the Amex. What about, Jay, Everton-Bournemouth back on match day 3? Do you remember that one?
I can't say I do.
That was the
Charlie
late turnaround, wasn't it? That was they were
It
2-0
was
up and lost 3-2.
Dangerous lead.
It was the latest. It was the latest that a team had ever been 2-0 up. How many minutes exactly, Duncan?
I think it was 86 when Bournemouth got the first, yeah.
So they were 2-0 up going into the 86th minute, and they ended up losing 3-2. Incredible scenes. All right, well, that'll be going again, but this time at the Vitality. You've got Saturday at 12:30 kicking things off. Spurs-Newcastle. That was a 2-1 win for Newcastle in the reverse back in August. Lord knows what it'll be this time around. In the 3 o'clock games, Aston Villa host Leicester. They beat them 2-1 in August. Palace-Chelsea, the reverse fixture finished 1-1. Saints against Brentford. It was a 3-1 win for Brentford when they played them at the G-Tech. And Man City-West Ham, which was also 3-1 back in August to City, because that was, back then.
I got a hat-trick back when he used to do that sort of thing.
It was his second hat-trick in a row as well.
And
So,
everyone was...
I mean, the hot takes at the time, it's worth revisiting. Perhaps we will a bit later on. At 5:30 on Saturday, Brighton-Arsenal. Sunday then, you got your Fulham-Ipswich, which was 1-1 last time. Liverpool-Man United, which when they played it at Old Trafford was 3-0 to Liverpool. And then you'll have to wait for Monday night for Wolves-Nottingham Forest. That was another 1-1 draw back in a particularly drawsy match day.
The Nuno derby.
Yeah, very much so. Very, very much so. As I say, lots of those wild week 3 assumptions now, particularly the Man City related ones, look wildly wrong now. So if 4 months is a long time in football, what do you think of our current certainties is going to be most off the mark come the end of the season? Will it be Liverpool's lead being insurmountable? Will it be Man City being a busted flush? What do you think? Will it be the notion that Man United have any risk of dropping into that bottom 3?
I guess maybe over the last few weeks, and I don't want to offend some of the people who come on this pod, people like Daniel Storey, Matt Davies-Adams, but I guess some people are assuming that Forest will drop out of the top 4 at some point,
right?
And that it's only inevitable.
Yeah.
But maybe they are just still in there at the end of the season, and it's not a Chelsea or a Man City who get back in. Because that's right? Everyone just thinks, let them have a nice fun time over Christmas and give it a couple of weeks, and their form will drop off. But maybe it won't.
They'll still be there in the top 4 come the end of the season, says Jay Harris. All right, Charlie.
Well, I'm not saying that's definite.
That's very tricky because I think the nature, I did a piece on this a couple of years ago. Basically, predictions are awful generally because everyone assumes everything will stay the same forever.
Right. Yeah.
So,
but you're assuming the predictions will be bad forever.
Well,
the worst one's been where they extrapolate the points per game currently to the end of the season. So it's the same league table essentially just stretched out. It's like, cheers.
But it's just like, I remember we all going into the season 2 years ago, where actually Arsenal ended up nearly winning the league, City won it. But everyone at the start of the season had Arsenal 5th because they'd come 5th the year before, and basically the top 4 was as it was. Liverpool were going to compete with City for the title, and a lot of those things didn't happen because things change. But it's very hard. It's very hard to do that. We just assume things will change. But I am procrastinating.
Well, you don't have to give us.
Well, I think
you make a good case for not wasting any breath on.
Kind of, yeah. Though I think City will sort themselves out, and
will they?
They'll get top 4 anyway.
Yeah, I would say City will come second.
All right. Well, the Liverpool lead business, because they're being wildly hailed, 6 points ahead with a game in hand, as being pretty much a done deal as regards the title. It is now 6 points, though, with Arsenal having a bit of stab at keeping that title race alive, particularly with their performance Wednesday in that 3-1 win away at Brentford. Jay, you were actually there. Arsenal only the second visiting team to be victorious at the G-Tech, although admittedly the second in back-to-back games. And they came from behind to do it. How impressed were you with the Gunners?
Not that very impressed,
really?
Actually, yeah, to sort of put a downer on it. Brentford played really well in the first 45 minutes. They get a really good goal through Brian Mbeumo. Have to give a special shout out to Mikkel Damsgaard, who intercepts Odegaard's pass and sets up Mbeumo. Damsgaard, his first 2 seasons at Brentford, I think it's fair to say he was pretty awful. I think he had 2 assists in 49 games. This season, he's got 2 goals and 6 assists in 19 appearances. So he's a completely different player. And I think Brentford were really good at playing through Arsenal's pressure. Arsenal get a bit of a lucky goal where Jesus reacts quickest to a shot, I think it's from Partey, and heads it in. And then they just sort of blew Brentford away in a really rapid 10-minute spell at the beginning of the second half. And then the rest of the game was a bit boring, if I'm honest. But I know you were talking about whether I was impressed with Arsenal or not. And the reason I said I wasn't too impressed is because I know Merino scored, but I just don't think Mikel Merino and Calafiori had amazing games down the left side. Now, I'll caveat with Calafiori's, I think, just come back from injury. But they've rested Rice, and you'd like to think that Merino at this point in the season, you can see more signs of what he's offering that Arsenal team, but I didn't really see enough of it.
Yeah, he's an interesting one, Merino. I mean, I remember talking about this a few years ago in relation to Willian, who was another, well, he was certainly a very underwhelming Arsenal signing, and I compared it to when you watch an actor who is meant to be really good, but you can't really see what they're doing, and you're kind of like, what? Am I missing something here? And
Charlie, who?
Well, I remember the time I said Tom Hiddleston, someone who I just don't get it. To me, he's
hold, isn't he?
Yeah, to me, just incredibly wooden. But people seem to. I'm like, what am I missing here? And I kind of feel that Merino, like, I think it's like he does things that you wouldn't spot, but he does take up good positions, or he does actually win a high proportion of his duels, or he takes some nice touches.
You'll never sing that.
Well, yeah, but and I'm not saying he's not gonna be a useful signing, but I think it is hard sometimes to pin down. Like, is he Xhaka? I think he was signed to do that. The later years, Xhaka, when he was playing that left 8, getting forward, and he scored his goal and he's a threat at set pieces. But we were told as well he was this kind of aerial duel monster, and I remember thinking at the time, like, I can picture that in Sunday League, what that looks like. I can picture that very clearly. I don't really know what that looks like in elite level football, because the ball's very rarely just kind of hoofed up and you're going for second balls. You see it most at set pieces, and to be fair, he does look useful there. He's scored a couple of set piece goals, but when you look at Arsenal's summer, they brought in Merino, Calafiori and Raheem Sterling, and you've got to say at this point, doesn't feel like any of those players have really moved the dial. Calafiori, I do think he's been battling injuries throughout, so kind of reserve judgment on him.
His career a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not a big. It's not like they didn't know that he'd had a serious injury growing up.
But speaking of injuries, Kai Havertz out through illness. Declan Rice started on the bench, but most of all, Bukayo Saka, who's going to be away for a while, with Nwaneri.
Who did well, I thought.
Yeah, really well.
Still, he's not 18 till March.
With the startling fact offered by the commentator was that he was actually born in Arsenal's first season at the Emirates.
Not in the Emirates. He was born,
Oh,
One of the executive
really?
boxes.
But there was a comma in there.
It was a nice cyclical moment as well, because Nwaneri made his first ever Premier League appearance against Brentford at the G-Tech
When he was
2.5 years
15.
ago, when he was 15.
And everyone thought it was a
gimmick.
disgrace.
Yeah. So Arteta did actually say that he had a bit of a gut feeling that this was the time to give Nwaneri his first Premier League start, and sort of mentioned that previous game. Because someone suggested, did he only start because of illness? And Arteta was like, no, not at all. I felt like this was the moment for him regardless. So
I mean, it is interesting that people were talking, he's the understudy to Odegaard and it's going to be hard to get minutes. But, sometimes for young players, it is an unseen event that gets you into the team. Like Saka's injury, I mean, Arsenal probably will try and, sign someone, I think, maybe in the window. But
You'd know, Duncan.
well, maybe I do, maybe I don't. But Nwaneri's got a real opportunity here. And you don't want to overplay him. That is the risk.
As we've seen with Bukayo Saka. Wow. I mean, I would just say on Arsenal and how good they were, I do think this was an impressive fight back, just because I was sort of watching this and readying my takes for today.
Oh, yeah.
And I was thinking, I don't know, it just felt reminiscent of the Fulham game where Arsenal sort of dominated, in inverted commas, the first 10 minutes without really doing a lot. Then Fulham and Brentford went and scored with their first shot. And there was a period up until Arsenal got that equaliser where I was thinking Arsenal felt a bit like they were in sort of late Wenger years, where you sort of felt like teams might quite enjoy playing them right now because they have a lot of possession, but a lot of it's quite sterile. They don't have the really threatening attackers, and they seem a bit vulnerable in transition, certainly when Partey's playing as the six rather than Declan Rice.
Just completely forgot that Keane Lewis-Potter has that shot that Reyes spills,
Yeah.
and then Jesus scores 60 seconds
Yeah.
later. So that was like a massive
Had
game
Raya
changer.
not got to that and kept it out
then
Then they would have been 2-0
They were
down.
having very different
Great
discussion.
Right.
Great Hawkeye usage as well. Lovely.
very, very good.
But that all said, so I do think it was impressive that Arsenal were able to shift that narrative and actually come and get a good result. And yes, Brentford were missing a lot of players, but so were Arsenal as well.
I mean, it was the first time Arsenal have gone 1-0 down in an away game and come back to win since they played Aston Villa back in February 2023, which is a long time ago.
a long time ago.
So,
Gabriel
good
Jesus
times.
has now got 6 goals in 4 games. Ay caramba. What about Brentford, Jay, your former patch? That is now 2 home defeats in a row, and they've lost 4 of their last 5.
Yeah, they're really struggling with injuries at the moment, which sort of happened to them last season. I think Brentford made the decision in the summer not to really sign any more fullbacks because Rico Henry and Aaron Hickey were supposed to come back from long-term injuries at the start of the season. Neither of them have returned. Hickey is potentially out for the rest of the season. So it means they're having to shift Sepp van den Berg, who's normally a centre-back, to right-back. They're using Keane Lewis-Potter, who they signed to play left wing, as a left-back. So they're sort of getting away with putting lots of people in unfamiliar positions. And when you've got one player doing that on the pitch, I think you can get away with it. When you've got 3 or 4, I think eventually you're just going to get caught out.
I see. They are a significant distance ahead of the teams in trouble, so...
They'll still be fine. Abumo scored again. This is a fantastic player. They've got really good attacking talent, but I just think there's so many holes in their defence at the moment that they're just... I think that's also why they just never keep clean sheets at the moment.
you say they're safe, but they're only 2 points ahead of Manchester United. So.
Nice bit of perspective there, Duncan. Next up for Arsenal is a trip to Brighton, who've gone 7 games without a win, 5 draws in that time. It was a draw between the 2 teams, as we mentioned earlier, when they met at the Emirates back in August. And
that's a tough game.
it is it?
I think so. I mean, especially Arsenal coming off the back.
Sure.
Well, I think in the sense that Arsenal coming back off a pretty tight turnaround. They've got a few players who are clearly battling sickness. Brighton have the extra 2 days rest. I wouldn't be surprised if that's... And Timber's out.
suspended.
Yeah,
That
So straight away there were people tweeting, Partey up against Matoma.
Yeah.
Going to be an interesting.
Well, and it's a kind of double blow because you lose Timber, obviously, but you also lose Partey from the centre. He's got, and he's so much. I thought he was very good yesterday in kind of controlling things. Him at right back, against Matoma. I almost wonder if I don't think they would, but whether they think about shifting Calafiori, because they've got so many they've got a load of left backs and no right backs available. So I wonder if they think about moving one. I know that basically never happens, but the way fullbacks invert now, you'd think, could that be more possible than back in the day?
Worked for England at the Euros, so
Yeah.
who knows? Duncan, you, I think, were shaping to mention a stat about Fabian Hürzeler.
Was I?
The one about he could be the fourth manager in Premier League history to draw 10 of his first 20 games in the competition. That would be an achievement.
After John Lyle, John Dean and Egil Olsen. Drillo, as he was known to his friends. Brighton, they're a bit underwhelming at the moment. So, I mean, this fixture tends to have drama associated. Obviously, we had the Declan Rice red card earlier in the season. During COVID times, this fixture in Brighton, remember when Neil Maupay injured Bernd Leno, which brought...
won Argentina the World Cup.
Well, Emi Martinez became the Yashin trophy-winning machine that we know and love now. So, I would fancy Arsenal to win this, to be honest. I think Brighton are kind of treading water a little bit, which what you need to do in the sea, so it makes sense.
While Arsenal are at the Amex, their title rivals Liverpool will be facing Man United. We'll talk about that next. Man United currently 6 points above the drop, and maybe a bit of a reach to talk about United and the drop but they've got this trip to Anfield coming up. They lost 3-0 against Liverpool at Old Trafford in the reverse fixture. And when you look at the numbers these two teams are putting up, they're a bit concerning from a United point of view. Liverpool, 23 matches unbeaten in all competitions. They've scored 14 goals in their last 3 games. United, 6 defeats in Ruben Amorim's 11 games in charge. In fact, only the bottom 4 have lost more Premier League games than United this season, and that's company they could soon be keeping, or is that some mad narrative building there? United, in their last 8 Premier League visits to Anfield, how many goals have they scored?
3.
1?
1. Wow. How many have they scored in their last 5 visits? None goals. Wow. Anyway, back to your...
7-0.
Got them a point last season.
To be fair. Round it out. They would take a 0-0 in this game, for sure. I mean, they lost 6 games in December, which is the most they've lost in a calendar month since September 1930.
It's pretty rare to play 6 league games.
Well, they're playing 6 in January, so they could have got a chance to match.
They could lose 12 in 2 months. When was the last time that happened?
Well, what we know, they were on 22 points. They're going to need more than that to stay up. So they're going to have to get probably another 14 points, I'd say. So they're at that stage where they probably just need to go through the fixture list and go, that's a draw.
Well, they had a draw here last season. Is there any way you can see them throwing a spanner in the...
No. I mean, they drew the game at Old Trafford as well and knocked Liverpool out of the FA Cup. So
last season,
yeah. So they did a job on them last season. But yeah, I mean, it's... Other than by saying stranger things have happened, there's not really a logical argument to make, I don't think.
But Ten Hag was also a bit more prepared to say, I'm just going to let you have the ball and counter-attack. Whereas we know Amorim is not really going to do that.
I mean, and we're getting to the point with Amorim where it's like, we admire your commitment to your principles, but at some point, as you spiral...
Is he entering Ange territory? Because somebody was asking about that.
This feels like the principles war off at the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're just so susceptible. Newcastle, the first 30 minutes of the game earlier in the week, Newcastle should have been 4 or 5 up. They absolutely just tore them to pieces. And yes, they had a Eriksen, Casemiro, welcome to the 2000s central midfield, which they quickly changed. And they did improve when Kobe Mino came on. But I think it's a real tough ask for them. And, I think there's so much that resonates from it because for so long, Liverpool were off their perch and... Liverpool have returned a bit to the perch, but to see United fall this far off.
Wow.
I don't think Liverpool ever got as bad as United are now.
Yeah.
When...
I don't know. I mean, it does feel...
Next season, possibly.
But even there were those periods where they were just like... They were so irrelevant for periods.
Irrelevant, but they weren't.
Roy Hodgson was their manager. at one
Well, yeah,
point.
there
Do
was
you remember
the Hodgson sort of, and there were very similar discussions at almost this exact time of year of whether Liverpool could get relegated that season under Hodgson.
Yeah.
But it does remind me a bit of that, and in the same way, I was someone who never. I got into football after Liverpool had been good, and I didn't really sort of care about them particularly or think of them as being that good. And it's weird to think there must be so many fans who they've never seen United be anything but this sort of husk of a club who every week we have to have this sort of State of the Union, like, oh, what's happened to them? But a lot of people probably don't really care that much because they've never seen them be that relevant. When were they last in a proper title race? They haven't been since Fergie went. That was 2013.
Yeah.
Don't forget they finished second once.
I know, yeah.
Mourinho's greatest achievement.
Well, and under Solskjaer as well.
No,
so
yeah.
they weren't in a title race in either.
I think it's quite telling, like kids these days don't see that. You see kids walk around London in Manchester United shirts. You would have done 20 years ago, and they're just seen as like why are they still so relevant? To Charlie's point, but they're still a huge club, and we're all very fascinated by the ongoing situation.
Well, for sure. If you grew up with them under Ferguson, it is just endlessly kind of fascinating.
There is also that enormous kind of hubris about them and their own self-perceived status. And well, for United fans, I'm sure of any age, these are desperate times. 3 straight defeats without scoring a goal their team has had. If they have another of those this weekend, and figures show that's quite a possibility, that'll be the first time they've lost 4 league games in a row without scoring a goal since 1909. Over 100 years.
We're creeping back to 19th century records as each week goes by. So, yeah.
Well, all right. They have got Bruno Fernandes and Manuel Ugarte back from suspension this weekend. Jay, I saw a slight but perceptible shake of the head as I said that.
I just suddenly thought, how many games has Ugarte actually played this season to rack up 5 yellow cards
I
already?
had the exact same thought.
Yeah, I swear he wasn't playing that much in the beginning.
That's a really impressive ratio. Yves Bissouma-esque
Yeah,
numbers.
it is. I'm
What
gonna have
about
to find out now.
Fernandes? Do you see him having his return inspiring the team in any way?
Well, like he did in that 7-0 defeat, remember, where he was sort of kind of him at his absolute worst.
Fair.
I mean, maybe. He's a good player, and so if they are to do something, they probably need him to be at his best. Like, he was good against City. And
The one
made
thing you
difference.
can say for Bruno Fernandes is if United did go down to the Championship, he would absolutely tear up the Championship. Like, he would be brilliant, And I could imagine him...
That's the one thing you're prepared to
Yeah, I can imagine him really enjoying that kind of like
the scrap of
Buffon-esque season of like we go down and we get back up. But yeah, we're jumping ahead
How
slightly.
do you see their promotion chances from the Championship?
Becoming a yo-yo club.
Well, the game at Burnley will be big, so yeah.
Speaking of Liverpool, which we actually weren't at that particular point, but today, did you know, January 2nd, 2025, marks the 10-year anniversary of Steven Gerrard announcing he was leaving Liverpool, headed off to Los Angeles. Is there a contemporary figure in the Liverpool ranks who might be making an announcement soon, you think, Duncan?
Don't think so. I mean, obviously we know that Real Madrid have put in an offer. For
Spanish
Trent.
press call it 90% done.
Well, they say that about a lot of stuff, to be fair. But yeah, I mean, it would be foolish, I'd say, for Liverpool to cash in this month. I don't think they need to.
Okay.
But also, let's say Alexander Arnold is set on leaving Liverpool. I don't think you leave in the middle of a season when you're performing so well in the Premier League, the Champions League, etc. You could go out on a real
Unless you're
high.
Ruben Amorim.
Yeah. But you could go out on a real high, probably as a club legend, someone who came through the academy, won multiple trophies with them, and then you can sort of say, look, I want to experience something else, and that's fine. But leaving in the middle of a season, you would sully all of that.
I think if he left in the summer, I think he's kind of given up legend status if he leaves.
Yeah, especially on a free. I do get
But I think
that.
if he guides Liverpool to, let's say, a league and Champions League double,
that'd be
then
nice.
you can probably walk out with
give it 10 years, and then they'll call him a legend again. While he's still playing.
Yeah, you'll get to do a half-time draw in a Carabao Cup game.
I think you can leave a club for Real Madrid, and after what?
Not
No, like
convinced.
Beckham leaving Man United.
I think
Beckham
you
is still a
can.
Man United legend, no?
Yeah, but they got money for him. I think the fact
Oh,
that
I
if you
see.
like McManaman, walked out, Owen left at a point where, if he'd have stayed, he'd have won the Champions League the following year, etc. So they have got a history of like big players going to Real Madrid.
I know what you mean, though, Jim. It shouldn't have to be like it does feel a bit binary. Like you're either with us or you're against us, and it's not like you're joining football. Well, that is football, but it's not like you're joining a rival club domestically. Like I understand why that would cause more consternation.
And fans are so good at remembering when their own players do this, but not when their club does it. Like Liverpool when they got Van Dijk or Southampton, made a few sneaky inquiries, and it's like every club does it. You don't mind when you sign someone; everyone's happy, but it's football.
That's football. There you go. That will be the football at Anfield on a Sunday at 4:30. Elsewhere this weekend, third place Forest go to Wolves on Monday night. As you mentioned, Charlie, that is the Nuno derby.
And Cunha's finally been banned.
And Cunha's been banned as well.
2 games.
So no Cunha there. Chelsea, who are 2 points behind Forest in 4th spot, will be visiting Crystal Palace, and Newcastle, who are 5th, 3 points behind Chelsea, visit Spurs, which sounds like it could be lively, you'd think. Jay, you're going along to this.
I certainly am, yeah. Obviously, I've taken up Charlie's position covering Spurs for The Athletic, and, Brentford were stable. You knew what you were getting, and Spurs, it's just it's been a roller coaster.
I did warn you.
You did, but the last few home games they've obviously drawn 2 Wolves where they conceded a late equaliser. You had the 4-3 against Chelsea, 6-3 against Liverpool,
right?
The 4-3 against Man United in the Cup.
It's the worst home form in the Premier League. Is it fair to say?
I think certainly recently.
It's the worst Spurs home form since Juan Ramos.
So this is the first time they've finished in the bottom half of the Premier League at the end of a calendar year since 2008, 2009. I think it's the first time they've not won 5 league games in a row since October 2008, which was Juan Ramos era. So they're racking up the bad records at the moment. And they're just... I know we were talking about sometimes you need injuries to allow young players their opportunity, but Archie Gray's basically now a centre-back, and he's only 18 years old. And I feel,
I can't need to also play left-back.
I feel so sorry for him. He was coming up against, Salah, Luis Diaz, etc., and he was brought to play in midfield, sometimes right-back, and now he's, potentially going to be up against Alexander Isak this weekend. So Spurs' injuries are just causing them so many problems, and I think one thing you can guarantee with Spurs at the moment is that they will concede, so they sort of have to outscore teams. It's just whether they can outscore a Newcastle team who are in great form at the moment.
Yeah. And Newcastle 5 wins in a row in all competitions by contrast, and 4 clean sheets in a row in the Premier League as well, worryingly for Tottenham Hotspur. Alexander Isak, who's scored in his last 6. Yeah, and Spurs, the players you mentioned, the absentees. You've got Bentancur out now, suspended. Cher as well, and Destiny Udogie as well.
Yeah, so that's the rumour. We've not confirmed that yet.
6 to 10 weeks, they're saying.
Yeah, so we're not 100% sure on that at the moment. But Udogie has been sort of managing a bit of muscle tightness recently. He missed, I think it was the Carabao Cup game against United. He missed the game against Liverpool. Came back against Nottingham Forest. And was it against Wolves he came off? There's been so many games over the Christmas period, they're all merging into one. But I think he came off against Wolves, and the suggestion is that it is quite bad.
He missed a chunk of the back end of last season, and he's played a huge amount this season, and he's playing in probably the most demanding position in the Postecoglou system. So this injury has felt like it's been in the post.
And it does mean that Spurs will be without first choice goalkeeper, 2 first choice centre backs, first choice left back. So bring on Jed Spence.
Crikey.
Yeah, and Bentancur back out. I mean, you would think Newcastle would be relishing this game. Like the way they're playing. They are in a good moment, and the way they went to Old Trafford and played with such authority.
They've absolutely nailed their midfield as well. Like the Tonali Guimaraes combo is so good now, because when one goes forward, the other stays back. And
so good. What's the mood like at Spurs, Jay?
It's quite up and down. I think what they're clinging on to at the moment is the fact that they have got this Carabao Cup semi-final. Although I think it's going to be difficult for them to beat Liverpool over 2 legs. I think if it was a one-off game, I might have a bit more confidence. But 2 legs, especially with the second leg being at Anfield, I think it's going to be really tough. They should get into the the top 8 of the Europa League. They've got 2 very winnable fixtures against Hoffenheim away and Elfsborg. So I think there's enough going on in other competitions for them to get excited about, but the league form at the moment is just, they just can't arrest the slide.
Who they got in the Cup? Tamworth
away.
Yeah. But in those European games, Spence isn't registered, is he?
Yeah.
So then it's like Gray's going to have to play left back there, while maybe simultaneously playing centre back. I mean, like, they really are stretched. But yeah, I mean, I feel like the way things are going with Spurs this season, I don't see that compelling a reason to make a managerial change, even if you don't think Postecoglou is the guy long term. They're in a position where they could win a cup. The way they play is such risky football, but you know, in one-off games, that might be enough to get them a trophy. And what's a change in manager? Yeah, it might sort of salvage their season in inverted commas, move them up to 6th as opposed to them finishing maybe 7th under Postecoglou. I don't know. It doesn't feel like it's really worth just chucking it all out again.
Do you bring in like a negative manager and go back to sort of, you know? I mean,
though it's not so binary. I mean, there are plenty of managers in between Ange and say
but I think the new manager
would
feel pressure to like, what do you need to fix? I need to, you know, make us hard to beat.
And there's also not anyone really out there right now.
Just on the subject of Nuno, who had his amazing time at Wolves, is having an amazing time at Forest, and in between you've got that brief and pretty dismal spell with Spurs, where he is regarded as tremendously negative. That's not the football he plays with Forest.
Well, I don't know. I think it's partly about expectation. The way he wanted to play at Spurs, if you remember that summer he came in, there was the big thing of Harry Kane, will he go, will he not? And the expectation was that he may well. And I think Nuno, you know, if you look, Kane missed the first game under Nuno, and they beat City at home, and they played with Son and Bergwijn and Lucas Moura as a front 3. And the way they played that day was kind of sit deep, but play with rapid, exciting, counter-attacking players, which is not a million miles from what he's doing with Forest.
Right.
But but when you're doing that with Forest and it's getting you to 3rd, this is amazing.
Right.
When you're doing it with Spurs, it can seem a bit, shouldn't we be on the front foot? Do we really want to be playing this reactive way? That said, if they'd got good results playing that way, he might have been forgiven a bit. The results were patchy, but actually the performances were even worse than the results. They were just very reactive. But I think it's, you know, it's fine to, you know, I think there's a lot of sort of like, oh, Spurs, you know, you were wrong to ridicule Nuno. And yes, they were harsh on him, but he just wasn't the right guy. It's possible that he was the wrong guy there and he's the right guy for Forest. Those two things can coexist quite happily.
Forest, the bottom of the Premier League for accurate passes per game, the bottom for possession. You know, they are a very reactive team. It's a bit like when Gareth Ainsworth left Wycombe to go to QPR. You know, you can't just transfer philosophy to a club that isn't having it. And you'll find that a lot of clubs, often in London, called things like Tottenham Hotspur and Queen's Park Rangers, fans have a belief on how they want their team to play.
But it's like with Unai Emery. You know, I think there was a lot of when Unai Emery got Villarreal to Champions League semi-final, and when he's done very well with Villa, there's a lot of kind of, were Arsenal wrong to get rid of him? It's like, well, no, because it didn't work out there. It can work out somewhere, but not somewhere else. That's just how football goes. Same with play. There are a lot of players who you'll see popping up in the Champions League and be like, wasn't he crap at Stoke? How can that work? And it's like, well, it just happened.
Gnabry.
Or someone like Serge Gnabry.
English football's got a really weird thing where it's so binary. Once people are like, that person or player or manager is bad, that's it, he's done. Like,
irredeemable.
Like Marco Silva went to Everton, didn't do very well, so that's...
Yeah.
He can never go to Everton. In Italy, they rehire managers all the time, don't they?
They do, don't they? They haven't got the money to get new ones. That's the thing.
But it is amazing that Nuno, you know, he was this sort of joke figure at Spurs. And don't get me wrong, you know, it was harsh on him a lot of the time. And then went to Saudi and was, you know, that was like confirmation that, oh, Nuno's completely washed, forgotten man. And then here he is, 3rd in the Premier League.
Forest, lest we forget, were not happy when he was appointed. So they seem to have cheered up a bit.
Well, there you go. There you go. The ability to absorb new information and modify your opinion on the basis of it is, I think, a key one going forward. Chelsea are just ahead of Newcastle, 3 points clear of them in the race for top 4, although top 5 might be enough. Chelsea will be at Crystal Palace. Behind them, Man City have their hand up asking to be included in the top 4 conversation. They're 4 points off the promised land and only 1 behind Newcastle, and they're facing a West Ham team in real trouble. West Ham hammered 5-0 by Liverpool last Sunday. West Ham's record against the top 6 is rubs West Ham, who've just lost Jared Bowen for apparently at least 6 weeks after the fractured foot that he suffered against Arne Slot's side. Ooh. Richard David Pike says, could we see West Ham slip into the relegation fight? This is a popular game to play, isn't it, with a big club? In the next few weeks, continues Richard, after their mauling against Liverpool, Bowen injured, Ipswich and Wolves looking recently improved, and tough-looking fixtures for the Hammers coming up in January. Do you fear for West Ham? Is that a bit early for such talk?
I worry for them, but I don't fear for them yet.
I see.
I'm deeply concerned.
Okay.
They're a point above Man United, so for now, they're fine.
Okay. Above the Man United line. What about
losing Jared Bowen is a big blow.
Yeah.
Obviously, he's been playing more as a centre forward recently. I mean, maybe it's time for big Nick Fulkrug, the winter of the big man. So yeah.
Yeah.
He's
Well,
gotta
he's
step
waiting for his defining moment with West Ham. Defining's the wrong word. He's waiting for his
Launch moment.
Yeah. City, they beat Leicester last time. Will they win at home to West Ham?
Yes.
Okay. What about Chelsea's visit to Crystal Palace? They've been having a bit of a dip themselves, haven't they, Chelsea?
Yeah, that's interesting because Chelsea, 2 defeats and a draw.
Yeah. And
the
against
last
the
three.
teams that they've played, he says, trying to think, it was Everton, it was Ipswich and Fulham. Yeah. Well, there you go. And now Palace at home. Palace, who've only lost 2 of their last 11 in the Premier League after their shaky start. They've also got Mark Gay back from suspension up against his former club.
Yeah, and I think if Chelsea, Chelsea's was sort of jostling with Arsenal, and Arsenal recently went to Palace, and though they beat them 5-1, I thought Palace were pretty good in lots of ways. Like they made it very uncomfortable. They made the Arsenal defence, which is normally pretty solid, look less comfortable than it's looked at pretty much any game this season. Palace could have scored 2 or 3 that day. So I do think Palace will feel they could really unsettle Chelsea as well, especially given their defence is a lot flimsier.
I think Palace are probably in the falsest position in the Premier League.
Really? That position currently is 15th. They are 5 points clear of Ipswich, who are 18th.
You think they should be higher?
Yeah, I think if they look at... I mean, they went to Brighton and smashed them. So and they're sort of 7 points behind Brighton. I would think they could easily have them in their sights down the A23.
Are, in Man United terms, -2. They're 2 below United.
Yeah, that is true. But they know how to defend. So.
Again, important going forward. All right, well, that's what's going on with those teams chasing Champions League places. We'll see what happens. Sunday night we'll be here to round up all of that. But next up, let's have a little look at some of the other teams right down the bottom end. Talking about teams down the bottom end, a couple of questions just to kick us off. Matt Wall says, if Ipswich do survive, who goes? Which team outside the bottom 3 do you fear for most? Duncan, a name? Is it Everton? Is it Wolves? That's pretty much your...
Wolves, I would
Wolves.
go with, yeah.
Probably Wolves.
Wolves.
What was that? Who do we fear for the most?
Yeah, outside the bottom 3. If Ipswich's uptick in form was to continue...
To be fair, I obviously saw Wolves play Tottenham at the weekend, and I thought they were pretty good under the new head coach. So I'd maybe more say Everton, because look at how many goals Everton have scored. I think they've scored 15 in the league this season. Whereas Wolves, especially with a player like Matthias Cunha, I know he's banned for the next 2 games, but watching him at the weekend, I thought he should not be playing for that team.
Hwang coming in and...
So I think if it's not a false dawn under Pereira, then I think Wolves will be fine. I'd look more at Everton.
Everton, who've had 1 win in 10 games. Everton, who, as Colin Miller points out, over the last 9 games, 40% of their goals have been scored by Craig Dawson in his own net.
That's amazing.
That's a remarkable stat. And they are away at Bournemouth, who are 7 games unbeaten. Fair chance that will be a draw, I feel.
But then I guess with Everton, can they, now that their ownership situation's finally been resolved, maybe they can actually finally strengthen properly in the January transfer market. I guess they still are probably a little bit restricted by FFP, but they might actually feel like they can do something out of the long-term future of the club's been sorted.
What do you say, transfer guru?
I'd say...
I love this new role.
yeah. I say yes. Look out for the Goodison Park-based club making a few moves this January.
Speaking of transfers, Duncan, some breaking news today
Oh.
is that Aston Villa, who play Leicester Saturday at 3 o'clock, will be adding Daniel Marlon to their... Oh, maybe. It's not confirmed, is it?
Maybe. So
maybe.
I think they
Daniel Marlon
have
out of Borussia Dortmund.
bid around 18 million euros, according to David Ornstein.
Okay.
That feels
That's
Low.
quite
Low.
a decent price. Well, his contract expires next summer, so 2026.
Okay.
So what's that? 18 months left on the deal. But for someone with Champions League experience, Netherlands international, that is.
Yeah.
I thought that's a pretty good
borderline derisory.
deal. Yeah.
Derisory.
Negotiations can.
It's exploratory.
Villa's offer falls short of Dortmund's valuation,
There you go.
but negotiations continue.
Well, it's already quite a keenly contested top spot position up front at Villa Park. With
I guess he'd. You remember that Villa lost Moussa Diaby in the summer that he moved to Saudi Arabia. I can't remember which team exactly. And I do think they are quite reliant on Morgan, Rogers, and Watkins and Duran to sort of offer a lot of pace in behind. And so getting an extra option. And I think the good thing with Marlon is that he's very versatile. He can play out wide. He can play centrally. So it does. I can see the theory behind it.
Okay, well, more on that story at theathletic.com. FNK, meanwhile, asking, well, two things. Please update us on the financial situation of the French League, which is a bit of a niche question. Well, Jay's looking extremely worried.
we need to get Tom Williams on the line to answer that
or
question.
Julien Laurent. We'll have a Euro show that returns on Tuesday, and I'm sure that's going to be one of the first things that we get into. The other thing that FNK asks is, what's the best time for a club to sack a manager in the Premier League? Duncan, is there an optimum weekend, past results wise?
Do you mean best by most frequent or best?
No, I think best.
most
What's the most
successful?
effective?
Yeah.
You'd imagine it would be an international break kind of one.
Yeah, we did a piece a couple of years ago, which
Right.
I think every managerial change after either late March or early April basically makes no difference.
No difference.
So I think probably like end of November, December, so you get a window to play around in.
All right, the last two coming in seem so far to have had a nice bounce to them.
Yeah, very bouncy.
Very bouncy. Not so much for Ruud van Nistelrooy, who's recently taken over at Leicester. The skies over the King Power dark with the Football League's accountants who are circling ever closer.
Yeah.
After Leicester moved into the bottom three last weekend, they're now 19th. 1 point behind Ipswich. 2 from Wolves, who are currently the right side of the dotted line. And Leicester heading off to Aston Villa. Whether Daniel Marlon will be in any way related to that fixture seems unlikely, but even without him, it looks a tough one for the Foxes, who've had 4 defeats in a row. Villa will be without John Duran, who's still suspended. Morgan Rogers also out after last weekend, but they do have a very good record at home, do they not? Villa. They do, can confirm that. Anyway, what else happening this weekend concerning teams at that end of things? Well, bottom of the table, Southampton will be hosting Brentford, who've yet to win away from home this season. But Jay, just when their home form is taking a wobble, this looks like the ideal place to get that first win on your travels.
This has to be it. And actually, I remember Brentford having pretty bad away form a few years ago, and they went to Southampton and won 2-0. But I don't think they scored the second goal until quite late on. So even back then, they made it harder than it should have been. But I've not seen enough of Southampton under Juric to know how Brentford will approach this game. But I still think Brentford's firepower, like I mentioned earlier, Visser and Mbeumo, Shada, Keane, Lewis Potter, Damsgaard playing really well, should be able to blow them apart.
Okay. Villa, Leicester, Southampton, Brentford, those are both Saturday at 3 o'clock. Sunday at 2 o'clock, Ipswich travel to Fulham. Ooh. Hang on. Speaking of recent meetings,
Yep.
December 1963.
Yeah.
This game was the last time a team scored 10 goals in an English top flight match.
It was. It was on that hated Boxing Day of 1963, which I did think we weren't going to mention on January the 2nd. I thought we were clear, but just when I thought
Fulham,
I was out,
Ipswich,
we
they
pulled
don't get
back
to
in.
play each other very often, in the top flight.
No.
No.
Is the Boxing Day 1963 like you don't like talking about it or something?
Duncan
Yeah,
really hates it.
it's
Overdone.
I don't mind the actual day itself, but people use it as a sort of proxy to say, oh, football was better then, but the Boxing Day the previous year had hardly any goals. So how does that work?
How does that work, people?
It's just a random day that
People like the halcyon days of 1963.
But like Fulham Ipswich clearly does have a lot of goals. So we're going to see another 10 goal haul for one of
Fulham
those two
scored
teams?
10 goals in this game,
Yeah.
I mean, I predicted them to finish high up, so I'll be pleased. But
That's so true. You said 5th at Christmas.
yeah, it was close-ish.
Where are they? Oh, they're 8th, but how many points are they off 5th? 3 points.
But where were they?
No,
at Christmas?
sorry. Yeah, that's right. 3
No,
points. Sorry, Jay, what you
I
said?
just said because he said 5th at Christmas. So I said, where were they on Christmas Day?
They were around the same place. Yeah, I checked. So yeah, I mean we have come close. Southampton, which you just spoke about, Leicester winning 9-0 there. That they wasted a really good chance. So Jamie Vardy looked angry, and I think he actually, as a student of the game, did realise that this was a rare opportunity.
There you go. Ipswich, though, sudden uptick in their form, and the Cottagers unbeaten in 7 matches.
I would like Ipswich to stay up. Well,
definitely, especially after last season, all the promoted teams went down, didn't they? And then this would be the second. I think that
would be bad.
That would be
if
bad.
Sheffield United come back up, you probably would give up.
But it feels so
Sheffield
futile.
United with new backing behind them.
Yeah, but come on,
Same Chris Wilder.
Yeah, two of the worst seasons of the last 2 decades. We don't need them back for a bit. Should be a moratorium on how soon you can come back. If you stink up the Premier League.
Yeah.
Derby, to be fair to Derby, 11
They've
points in
respected
07
that,
08.
yeah.
They've not come back.
They've really kept a low profile.
Yeah, respect them.
Amon, don't want you back. Yeah. Okay. And that's the weekend. And then on Monday night, Wolves against Forest. Yeah, nice. Okay, looking forward to all of that. Wolves Forest apart, we'll be discussing what happens in those matches on Sunday night. But before we leave you today, what we have had just yesterday on January 1st was a full round of fixtures in the Championship. Always worth checking up on what's happening with teams like our old friends, the Blades and Luton and other exciting sides, Burnley,
Preston North End.
Leeds. Yeah. Names like those. So
The
next,
English champions never to play in the Premier League. There you go.
could this be their year? Well, Matt Davies-Adams of What the EFL, and of course a regular on this show, is up next to tell us about what happened January 1st. It's a Championship roundup and so much more now as Matt Davies-Adams of What the EFL joins us. Matt, Happy New Year.
Right back at you, James.
Woo! Matt, great to have you on. You've got a brand new Straight Outta Cobham about to pop out, I think, covering events Chelsea related over the festive period. And I think also in your swollen pipeline, there's a What the EFL. Maybe it's already out, I don't know. After the full round of fixtures that we had on January the 1st. Wow.
Yeah, next week we should be back with the difficult 101st episode of What the EFL.
Okay.
Adrian Clark of this parish and Sam Parkin with me for that. But boy, will we have a lot to discuss because if you think it's busy in the Premier League, you ain't seen nothing until you get to the EFL festive-wise.
Wow. Well, on Wednesday, for example, you had no less than 4 of the top 5 playing each other. Leeds, who faced Blackburn, and that was a 1-1 draw, and Sunderland, Sheffield United.
Yeah, Leeds, Blackburn, interesting. Blackburn seem to be the only team who've really got Leeds' number this season. They've taken 4 points off them, having played them twice. And even though it was a draw at Ellen Road, probably felt like a defeat for Leeds because they scored to go 1-0 up in the 88th minute and then conceded as the clock tick toward 90, and maybe that would give some further credence to the theory which is put forth by my co-host on What the EFL, that Daniel Farker might not be the man to get Leeds over the line. We certainly saw his perhaps somewhat limited tactical acumen writ large in the Championship playoff final last season, which is a weird thing to say given that they are top of the league at the moment and they are really good at Ellen Road as well. They won their previous 9 there. But yeah, Blackburn, who have an excellent coach themselves in John Eustace, who was the man that Birmingham decided to move out of the way to get Wayne Rooney in. How did that go? Yeah, they're on the fringe of the playoffs themselves, despite not having had a great festive period. But Leeds sort of recovering after having some key players out injured for a long time. You think they've probably got enough to get over the line, but it's one of those. They'll get promoted, then by November they'll get a new manager and be trying to stay in the Premier League. Not with Daniel Farke, I would imagine.
It's really exciting to imagine what Leeds and Sheffield United and Burnley could get up to in this Premier League. But I'm perhaps even more intriguing is the return of Sunderland, who've claimed a win over Sheffield United on New Year's Day and are now only 2 points off second. Tell us about the Black Cats.
It's a really interesting one, actually. Regis Lebris is how I think you say it. It's a kind of Parisian pronunciation. So you'd think it would be Lebris, which would obviously be a headline writer's dream, but no. Got Lorient relegated last season from Ligue 1, and for some reason Sunderland thought this is the guy for us, and obviously they knew what they were doing. Heavy French links with the Sunderland owners, which I guess played a part in that. But yeah, he's really hit the ground running in England. I saw them in pre-season, actually. They played Forest, and I was impressed with them then. He's been able to carry that on without doing a huge makeover of the squad, of a very, very young squad. Do Sunderland, including Bellingham Jr. and 17-year-old Chris Rigg, who's been injured for a couple of weeks, but they've both been pretty pivotal to them in midfield. Early penalty save against Sheffield United at 0-0, probably key in that one. But yeah, they're right up there, Sunderland. I think it will be Sheffield United and another for automatic promotion, probably Leeds, but Sunderland will hope to keep the pressure on. And Burnley, I mean, you allude to the fact that these are the teams who came down with a whimper, or two of them last season. If you thought Burnley's kind of pointless, expansive style of play under Vincent Kompany was not great on the eye, well, Scott Parker's done a full 180. They claim their 7th 0-0 draw of the season against Stoke on New Year's Day. Amazingly, they are second in the table, which maybe tells you it's not the strongest championship it's ever been.
All right. It might not be, but it's strong enough to see Rob Edwards' Luton spiralling down the table. They're way down. They're only just above Pompey, I think, are they not? Who've only themselves just escaped the bottom three. They lost again on New Year's Day. What's going on at Luton?
This is a painful one for us at What the FL, because we really like Luton, because their chairman was kind enough to write a whole article on our podcast in his programme notes ahead of a game last season. Such a fan of it is he. And obviously Rob Edwards is just beautiful to look at, so you don't want to see that handsome face looking furrowed. He's generally got a result whenever they've needed it this season, but they've only won back-to-back games once, and they go to QPR, who are in excellent form at the moment, next before a really daunting trip to the world famous City Ground in the FA Cup. So yeah, you fear for Edwards. It's interesting because they haven't had a huge overhaul of the squad. They lost some key players over the summer, Ogbene, Ross Barkley, etc. But they brought in some decent championship level players, but it's just not happened to them. But it's also a kind of reversion to the mean, I think. They had a couple of seasons where they were, well, one where they got promoted, one where they were on the fringes of the playoffs, but generally they've been kind of scrapping around the bottom end of the championship since they came up from League One. So maybe just going back to what has traditionally been their level of late, but that's a tough one to stomach when you've got, a pocket full of parachute payments, which should be able to shoot you up the table a bit.
Indeed. A shout out for Josh Windass, Dean's son, I'm guessing, who scored from his own half in the Owls' 4-2 win over Derby on New Year's Day.
It was kind of, do you remember the one that Wayne Rooney scored for Everton? It was against Joe Hart, I think. It might have been against West Ham. So it's kind of, the trajectory of the ball's beautiful. It's not like a lob, a hopeful lob. He's kind of banged it and it flies a straight trajectory over the goalkeeper's head. Absolutely delightful stuff. He's from the Mario Balotelli school of celebration, by the way, in that he doesn't really do one because he doesn't see why he should, because he's just doing his job. But even he afforded himself a smile, having scored from downtown against hapless Derby County.
From a different postcode. Wow. Magnificent. Oh, you mentioned Wayne Rooney, who is no longer Plymouth manager. Who did they get in to replace him? Whoever it was got a 2-2 draw against Bristol City. Stoke also busting out a brand new boss for the new year, and they brought in Mark Robbins. He got a 0-0 at aforementioned Burnley.
Yeah, he was watching on from the director's box, I think, for that one. Ryan Shawcross, you remember him? He's been in charge for a couple of games. And while we're talking naughty Stoke Barclaysmen, John Walters is their sporting director these days, and this is a massive appointment for him because they fired Steve Schumacher pretty harshly earlier in the season, replaced him with the magnificently monikered Narcis Pelach. He lasted all of 19 games. So this is a really important appointment for Stoke, but for Walters in particular. Mark Robins, really, really capable / excellent Championship manager. So you would think that they'll be on an upward curve, but man, there's a big malaise about Stoke. There has been for a few years now. So if he can't turn it around, then you wonder who would. And yeah, Rooney just didn't happen for him. 10 without a win. They lost all but 2 away games. They didn't win either of those. It had to happen. I don't know what happens for him next. The director of football who brought him in, Neil Dewsnip, who knew him from Everton, he's gone as well. In my mind, there's been this story that Tranmere Rovers are about to be taken by ASAP Rocky. He's going to buy them out. And I think that Wayne Rooney is nailed on for that job, should he want it, back up on Merseyside.
Their results could be getting ASAP Rocky. Or Rocky ASAP, perhaps. Yeah. That was by mutual agreement. Matt, could you break that down in real words for us?
I think actually this is to Rooney's credit, because you say it's by mutual agreement. What that essentially means is that he foregoes the payout that he would have got for them cancelling his contract early. So he's actually done them a bit of a favour. I think it's normally when it's by mutual agreement, it's to save face for the manager who's been sacked. But I think Rooney probably deserves some credit for that, for walking away without a payoff.
Matt, magnificent. Duncan, New Year's Day, you were watching some Football League action, were you not?
Watch Wickham return to the top of the of League One. It's a bit of a 3-way race at the moment. Well, maybe 4. Huddersfield are sort of involved, but their game was postponed because of the weather at Wigan. Wrexham lost away at Barnsley. Their away form is probably the thing they're struggling with really in League One. Birmingham dominate games, but often don't finish them off, and they drew 1-1 at Stockport. So yeah, Wickham got a 96-minute penalty to beat Exeter and return to the top. So yeah, it's 50 points at the halfway point of the season. I don't know what that is over a full season, but it sounds like a big number. So.
Indeed. Oh, Matt, anything else you want to throw at us before you dive into Cobham?
Well, Duncan's being very modest there. It's worth pointing out what an excellent achievement this is from Wickham. Bear in mind, Birmingham spent £50 million on one player alone in League One. They ought to be walking away with it, and Wrexham obviously got loads of money themselves, Huddersfield having come down from the Championship. So it's really impressive that Wickham are able to keep pace with them. But yeah, other than that, I probably should just point out that Nottingham Forest are third in the Premier League, and wish you well with the rest of the show.
Not much of it left, Matt, but brilliant. Thank you so much for that. Look forward to hearing your thoughts on Chelsea and the What the EFL when that rolls around next week. For now, keep on having that Happy New Year.
Pleasure. Speak to you soon.
Thanks, Matt. Matt Davies-Adams. That's it then, really, isn't it, for today's show? Unless, Charlie, there's anything you wanted to add before you head off to Australia?
No, I don't think so.
Are you looking forward to the Open?
I am, very much, yeah.
Is it your Is this your first year actually going out to the various...
Well, no, I started the role in May, so I did.
Okay,
so
fair.
Did 3 out of the 4 last year, and have done
So you're
something else
completing the
before.
Grand Slam.
I'm completing the Grand Slam, and I've never been to Melbourne before. So
Really? What's been your favourite of the? What's your favourite trip so far?
Favorite trip, I think, was the US Open.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Is it? Nice. Excellent. Where are you off to this weekend, Jay?
I'll be at the Spurs Stadium on
talked about
Saturday
that, didn't we?
lunchtime. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. That'll be a busy one, no doubt. And Duncan, who have Wickham got this weekend?
Blackpool, a formerly historic side at home. So yeah.
Not sure if you can ever stop being historic once you're historic. I think
I think Blackpool giving it a pretty good go, but yeah, we'll see.
All right. Wherever you are this weekend, listener, I do hope that you'll be back with us on Monday morning for our roundup of all of the excitements of round 20 of the Premier League season. For now, many, many thanks to Charlie, to Duncan, Jay, to Matt, and to Liam and producer Charlie. Quite the cast list today. And you, listener, for now, from all of us here, it's goodbye. The Totally Football Show podcast is available 3 times a week, bringing you all the football news you could reasonably be expected to care about. We've got views, we've got stats, we've got analysis, we've got some of the best football writers around, and the whole thing is absolutely free. So have a listen on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or all the usual places by clicking on the link below.